When you hear the name Genghis Khan, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably a ruthless conqueror on horseback, right? Leaving a trail of destruction. And yeah, that's definitely part of the story. But it is not the whole story. What if I told you he was also one of history's greatest and most unlikely architects of globalization?
I mean, just look at this. On one side, you've got the myth we all know, the savage warlord, the destroyer of worlds. But on the other side, global trade, international law, cultural connection. So how on earth can both of these be true for the same guy? Well, that contradiction, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. It's the key to his real legacy.
So let's dive right in and look beyond that classic barbarian myth. You have to wonder, who wrote this version of history? And why is this brutal, one-sided image the one that's stuck around for centuries?
Now, let's be absolutely clear. The brutality, it was very, very real. His conquests were devastating. And those stories you've heard about his armies building pyramids out of human skulls, they're rooted in a pretty terrifying reality. We can't and we shouldn't just ignore that part.
But what if, after all that conquest, something totally different was built on top of the rubble? What if all that destruction was actually followed by a period of incredible creation and connection? Let's flip that coin over and see what's on the other side.
And that brings us to what you could call the world's first freeway. See, after conquering the largest land empire in history, Genghis Khan and his successors didn't just sit back and rule it, they connected it. They created this massive network for trade, for ideas, that stretched across continents. They basically kick-started global connection on a scale nobody had ever seen before.
Historians have a name for this era, the Pax Mongolica, or the Mongol Peace. And yeah, it sounds a little strange, right? Peace through conquest. But for about 100 years, the iron-fisted rule of the Mongols created this huge zone of stability, all the way from Asia into Europe. And that peace became the perfect ground for a whole new kind of global exchange to grow.
And this really breaks down how he did it. First, he united all the warring tribes of the steppe. Next, his empire went to work securing the old, incredibly dangerous trade routes. With the Mongol peace being enforced, suddenly merchants could travel safely. And the result? The Silk Road wasn't just brought back to life, it was supercharged. It was actually said that a young woman carrying a nugget of gold on her head could walk from one end of the empire to the other without being harmed.
And this is how they managed that security and communication. They created something called the Yam. Just think of it like a 13th century FedEx. It was this insanely efficient postal system with relay stations set up every 25 miles or so. Messengers could swap for fresh horses and keep going, covering up to 200 miles in a single day. This network wasn't just for mail. It moved goods, information, and ideas across the known world at incredible speeds.
Okay, but it takes more than just roads and fast horses to hold an empire together, especially one that massive and diverse. Genghis Khan knew he needed systems. He needed a universal law that everyone had to follow.
And that law was called the Yasa. It was the secret legal code, a set of rules that he himself established. And it governed pretty much everything, from how the military should behave to how ordinary people should live their lives.
And just look at some of these principles. I mean, they're shockingly modern. He established diplomatic immunity, which made it safe for ambassadors to travel between kingdoms. He created strict laws on property rights. But maybe the most surprising thing of all, he demanded religious tolerance. All religions had to be respected, and their priests and clerics didn't have to pay taxes. In an age of brutal holy wars, this was completely revolutionary.
So what does any of this have to do with us today? Well, all these systems, the trade, the laws, the communication, they created echoes that have lasted for centuries, and they've shaped our modern world in ways we barely even realize.
The Mongol Empire essentially became a giant pipeline for technology. Things like gunpowder, the compass, paper money, printing. The spread of these ideas from east to west was massively sped up by the networks the Mongols built. Now, they didn't invent all of them, not by a long shot, but you could say they globalized them.
But his legacy isn't just about culture or technology. It's also biological. Just look at this number, 1 in 200. What in the world could that possibly mean?
It's the estimated number of men alive today who are direct descendants of Genghis Khan, 1 in 200. That's about 16 million people. It is a mind-blowing statistic that just shows you the sheer scale and reach his empire had, an influence that literally spans generations and continents.
So I think it's time we reclaim the narrative a little bit, to see the whole picture. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was also a creator, an architect of a new kind of world.
Here's the most important takeaway. History is never simple. It's messy, it's complicated, it's full of contradictions. Genghis Khan was, without a doubt, a brutal conqueror who was responsible for immense suffering. And at the very same time, he was a catalyst for global connection, a man who laid the groundwork for systems that would shape the future of the entire world. Both of those things can be true.
And that really leaves us with one last question to chew on. How does our whole view of history change when we're forced to accept that sometimes the villains of the story are also its architects?